Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode. And today we are talking about how to heal the high achiever wound to create more purpose and fulfillment in your career and your life. And I am so excited to introduce you guys to Maggie Winzeler. And so, Maggie, I've known for a while now, but she has a phenomenal background she's a women's wellness advocate, business owner, writer, and coach. She recently launched a new social impact brand called Every Woman is Worthy. And I am a huge fan of this brand as well. I follow it regularly. And so she celebrates women's values and gives back to marginalized and oppressed communities of women. And Maggie has been featured in Shape, NBC News, Thrive Global, MyFitnessPal, The Washington Examiner, and dozens of other outlets for her holistic wellness advice through the years. Welcome, Maggie. I am so excited to have you.
Thank you, Olivia. It's awesome to be here. I can't wait to see where this conversation goes.
So I know we have a lot in common, right? Being driven women that have built companies and really just had big goals for ourselves. And I know that you've evolved a lot. I'd love to hear from you, how has the idea of achievement evolved for you to get to this place where you're now really just focused on purpose and fulfillment? How did you get to that point?
Yeah. So for me, I would say that my whole life I've been very focused on purpose, but purpose can be sort of torn down by that desire to just achieve for achievement's sake alone, right? The two can work together sometimes, but a lot of the time it creates a bit of a disconnect because you're not really embodied as you're going about trying to do your work. So for me, achievement has always been a challenge because it was modeled for me in my youth by my parents who had their own business. They actually had a bread company. My brothers took it over. So it's always been a family business and a lot of high pressure. Seeing my dad get calls in the middle of the night about issues. At one point, there was what do you call it, a bounty on his head or whatever, because people were being cutthroat in the bread business. Go figure. So I always saw a lot of stress and a lot of value placed on achievement and having business that grows year over year over year and being able to speak proudly about what you've built. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. There was a lot of healthy lessons I learned about working hard, being honest, treating employees well, giving people a helping hand who need help with employment or who need a loan within the business as a small business, because they're scraping to get by because of whatever medical bill or what have you. So I learned a lot of valuable lessons from my family, but it also put a lot of pressure on me as a kid inadvertently. So with that, I went into academia with this very grind mentality. And I graduated top of my class in high school. I graduated with highest honors from the University of Virginia. I graduated and got one of three people to get a special award when I graduated from a master's degree at Georgetown University. And so for me, that push, I can always figure out how to be the best. It created a sense of pride, but it also created a misplacement of where my worth was and is. So in a way, Every Woman is Worthy, it touches on so many aspects of where society says our value is. But for me, probably my longest challenge with identifying as worthy or not is in that place of achievement. When I went into fitness at the beginning of my career in holistic wellness, and I was working one-on-one with clients, I saw a lot of the same pressures I felt within myself. I saw those mirrored back at me through my clients. And these are people from diverse countries, diverse upbringings, all people who could afford the high-end service that I was providing at the time. But I saw how much this struggle with where identity is and where achievement is and where meeting, certain expectations really can crush people in the pursuit of trying to accomplish that achievement, whether be it for body shape, size, and image, the next, rung on the corporate ladder, job title, promotion, all of that stuff. So that was a helpful time in my life where at a very young age, I was challenged to think, wow, like I've got to coach these people. And I see that this is a thing for them and it's a thing for me. It's a challenge for a lot of people. It was my job to coach them to success. And so much of that happened in the soft skills. It wasn't as much, yes, I taught them how to use their bodies and about kinesiology and, holistic wellness and three-dimensional movement and how to prevent injuries and all of that. That was valuable, but more valuable than that was how I learned slowly over time to talk to people about the things without being a therapist, right? But talking to people in those training sessions about where their hangups were and how to really pull back and deconstruct and be more present within themselves. So that was kind of the beginning of my career, moving from like the purpose of wanting people to feel good in their bodies through fitness and exercise and things, to wanting people to be well holistically. And the purpose of that and that goal for me is really what has guided my career from that point forward. And that's, that started very early in my 20s. And through that, I've had a lot of different ups and downs and things that have challenged me to confront those narratives back in myself.
Yes, I can't wait to hear about this because I can so relate to that hyper high achiever, top of class. I was a, competitive athlete, and that conditioning
Yeah.
constantly being in this like competition for the best.
Yeah.
That programming doesn't go away easily because it's like there's always a scoreboard, right? So I'm curious, like, what was the big shift for you? When did that start to evolve off of constantly needing to compete and compare and really operate from a different place?
I hate to say it was trauma, but it was really finding myself in a situation where working harder caused me excruciating pain. So I was hit by a car when I was in my 20s. I was still in my early 20s. I was working in a full commission-based position, doing training in Washington, D.C. for very high-profile professionals in the government, in the nonprofit sphere up there, all sorts of different people. And I felt a lot of pressure to do a great job and to meet my sales quota and be the best on the training team for what I could do, where my numbers were and who I could work with and all of that. And then I was hit by a car. And on a full-time commission-based job like that, it's really, really hard. It's really hard to work enough hours consistently. Even when you're working like a dog, it's really hard to put in a full 40 hours of face-to-face training. Like that would mean that you need 60 hours of clients a week in order to have it shake out between work travel and people being sick to level out to 40 hours. Like it's almost impossible. So only really like one, maybe two people out of the entire team had employee benefits. So I didn't have health insurance through the company. When I was hit by a car, I didn't have medical or any paid time off at all. Didn't have a single vacation day. Any time I took off was me accepting that I didn't get paid for that day, and I had to plan it ahead of time for it. And so I found myself in a position where I had been physically injured. I was really lucky that I wasn't killed from that accident. I was physically injured, in a lot of pain, extremely inflamed, and showing up to a physical job without a lot of options. And that was that 5-year period. It was a long period, especially in what you think of as kind of the pinnacle of youth, right? that 5-year period was a really transformative, painful period in my life. I was in pain almost all the time. I had severe insomnia. I got maybe like 4 or 5 decent hours-ish of sleep a night because I was so uncomfortable all the time. And then I'd wake up and I'd be on my feet for 10 hours, sometimes teaching back-to-back classes and then training these people. And you're in stage presence, right? When you're working with clients, you're in that presentation mode where you exert a certain energy that can be really fun and exciting, but also take a lot out of you. So in that phase is really when I saw that I had to scale back. There was no option after a while of trying it and failing and being completely debilitated by it and my mental health suffering and reaching a really dark place of depression because I was so exhausted and just out of my mind, inflamed and uncomfortable. I reached a point where it was like, okay, I can keep on this track, or I can trust in my own value and what I bring to the table. And I can actually dial down the amount of work that I'm doing. And maybe sometimes I don't reach the sales quota, but at the same time, I'm doing what I need to for me. And I am of better quality to my clients as a result. So I cut my work hours down. I created my own schedule. I was like the only trainer who would absolutely would not show up and work nights. I would work mornings and I'd end my day around 2 o'clock and I'd go home and rest and do what I needed to and have a normal dinner sitting down and get a full night of sleep. And I'd wake up and get as many clients in as I could from 7 o'clock to 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And that was very unconventional for that industry, especially at that time.
That is so huge. And I think pretty much anyone that's like really aligned and in purpose has probably had that moment where you're just like brought to your knees and you're like, I can't keep grinding like this. And I think it reaches a point where you have to believe in your value outside of what you're producing. So I would love to hear from your mindset now. It's like, I mean, it's not just about how much you do and how much money you make, right? It's so much bigger than that. It's more about the impact and the purpose. And I can see that's how you're moving right now, just watching, everything you post online. But is that really, when did you get to the point where you're like, all right, I'm going all in on this mission, on this purpose? And it's a totally different world and lifestyle, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Every Woman is Worthy. Well, it does definitely connect to all the stuff that I mentioned in fitness, with seeing people feeling challenged about especially women, about their own value and everything and where that was coming from and helping them trust that it's from within. But for me, the big thing, and so it does tie in to the evolution to Every Woman is Worthy. But for me, that big moment, again, tied into tragedy. The big moment for me that pushed me to want to do Every Woman is Worthy and that really inspired the whole concept was that I went through a complicated pregnancy and a late pregnancy loss and went through medical complications with that where it was nobody expected it. I hemorrhaged and they had to do open surgery, emergency surgery to save my life. And I was very lucky to be here today because of the swift interventions taken. But what that did is it really opened my eyes to women's health in new ways, because I was so focused on health, and it made me push my boundaries and push my learning to think about not just women's reproductive health, but collective health and all of the different systems that can impact women, especially and in a negative or a good way. One of the reasons why my mind went that way was because, a woman who doesn't look like me, especially Black women in the United States, statistically are less likely to have the positive outcome that I had during that hemorrhage. So it led me to really think critically about how are our health systems working, who is marginalized by them, where are people in situations of oppression who need help. And so all of these learnings and things and stuff that I was working through really started to slowly give birth to the concept of every woman is worthy. And I told myself when I started it, I said, I really have to think about what is a brand, what is a message that I can get behind and know that I care so deeply about it that no matter what happens, I will stick with it. No matter what happens, I will make sure it moves forward in some way, shape, or form for the next 30 years of me working. And it doesn't have to be profitable. It doesn't have to, reach, 500 million people or whatever, those first few years, I told myself it's all about being authentic and the message, and growth. And growth can look a lot of different ways. So that's how I framed it as I started. Every woman is worthy is from this place of purpose and making sure that that's the goal. Because if I expect to have an exit strategy in 3 years with starting something that has to organically build and that I have to respond to data points for and see, test the market and test what women want and how they identify with this message and where the pain points are. If I'm not doing that sort of active market research and investigation and thoughtfulness, and I just plow forward expecting it to be perfect on day one, I'm going to fail, and I'm going to be one of many startup owners that exits in less than 5 years and is in the hole. So really for me, how I framed starting this, being all oriented around purpose and people over profits, has everything to do, in my mind, with its long-term financial viability.
This is so inspiring because I think it's so unique to go into a venture with purely, I'm committed to a 30-year journey, and the purpose and mission is so inspiring that I don't even care if I make money from it. And I know there's people listening, and I can relate to this because that's kind of like what the Cove is to me. Like, it's
Mhm.
true passion and giving back and fully expressing that purpose and that soul's calling. And when you're there, you have like such a fire. And now it just explains why you're so passionate when I see you talking about anything on that platform. So I'm curious, from that place, for anybody out there that's like, how do you make time? You're a busy mom, you got to make money. Like, what are you? This sounds like a pipe dream. Like, how is this serving you? Right.
Yeah, yeah. So I think what something that's helpful to consider, especially for moms who typically handle more of the child care for better or worse, right, is that freedom, what looks like freedom, outward looking success comes with so much responsibility, right? With freedom comes a great responsibility. And for me, that's always finding, especially at this phase that I am with young kids. I've got an 8-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And so for me, it's being able to compartmentalize and shift gears quickly from one to the next. And that takes time. It takes practice. It takes patience and forgiveness with yourself when you don't get it right or when you're feeling on edge, because it's really hard to switch quickly. Um, and finding the tools to rejuvenate you so that you can find a way to operate in both modes when you need to and when you have to. And I think that applies to women who are working full-time jobs, who aren't necessarily business owners, and also to women who are working on their own business and their own ventures. Um, so yeah, so for me, a lot of the days are a big grind, right? Like, but I do find myself feeling really passionate about it and really enjoying it, because I love everything that I'm doing, and I'm stimulated on all of these levels that I want to be creatively, the marketing, the analytics, the design, the networking, getting to understand more about women's experiences as they reach out to me from literally all different places of the globe. So that's what really sustains me is compartmentalizing, being being able to pursue lots of different things that stimulate my brain, and finding ways to like revamp and prioritize my own needs from time to time. I don't know if that answered your question.
I think, yeah, where I was going with this is like, I know from my perspective, when you're moving in purpose towards a mission that just really lights you up, it's a source of energy fulfillment to
Mhm.
be doing that work. And that's how you know it's aligned
Mhm.
versus if you're doing it for the outcome or the accolades or the
Mhm.
income, you won't be sustained because
Mhm.
it's not the process that you're really in love with. So I love to hear that you're doing something because it's fulfilling in itself. The work is the joy for you. And that's how you know you're going to build something worthwhile because it's sustainable, right? And you set that intention from the get go. And I think so many people miss that because they're still operating from, I got to survive, which I
Mhm.
completely understand and respect. And I think that when people can trust that purpose can be fulfilling and create income, but not needing, I think it's just admirable that you started that without that being the thing that needs to happen for you to stay committed to it.
Well, and something that I think helps too is that when you're driven by purpose or you're feeling really aligned with the work that you're doing and you can envision yourself doing it long term, then what that does is it shifts your mentality about the work and the work process and the systems that you need in order for it to succeed. It shifts it into long-term thinking, and you're going to act really differently in business when you're thinking long term versus when you're only thinking short term. Short-term thought processes and goals are great, but like oftentimes if a business owner is only thinking about the next 30 days and not thinking about their long-term strategy, you can make some really brash decisions about ad spend, about resources, about handing over the reins of like your back end marketing and things like that, handing that out to an agency instead of owning it and figuring it out yourself, because it's like, oh no, I'm not figuring it out and I've got to make this money in the next 60 days. And so I'm going to pay all this money to this agency to figure it out for me. But they're actually not probably going to figure it out for you because you know your business better than they do. And if oftentimes people get burned because of these short-term decisions, trying to get in the green or trying to see a certain product reach a certain point really quickly, um, which of course that's part of business. But in the very beginning, those short-term decisions operating off of only financial outcomes can actually be the downfall of a lot of startups. Does that make sense?
Oh, I know so well because
Yeah.
when I left my business partnership and I started Career Evolved that first year, I was comparing to where I was, which was a multi seven figure company, and I wanted it
Mhm.
fast and I wanted
Mhm.
the ego just wants everything now. And we're comparing. And I did the same thing. I'm paying and investing in all these things to get there fast, but really in reality was setting so much cash on fire, right? Because of the impatience that you're operating from when you're constantly needing to be at a certain place to feel worthy.
Yeah.
And so I think when I thought about just your brand, Every Woman is Worthy, it's really, it hit home for me because it's a matter of gaining that fulfillment from
Mhm.
something within. And I take it as a really spiritual journey because
Mhm.
when you're aligned, you actually achieve more because you're focused on the impact, which is the value that people are paying for. And you end up having a really powerful brand and impact. And you happen to make a lot of money too when you get out of that place of needing it now, because now you're just not offering value, you're focused on extracting that value more than you are offering it, right? So
Mhm.
from where I'm sitting, I think everything we're talking about, although it sounds like a nice to have and this esoteric idea of letting go of the money, I
Mhm.
think it's just the focal point.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think it's also important too for people, for example, if they're starting a business and you want it to be really purpose driven, like before you do that, being honest with yourself. And I think setting the expectation, because the majority of businesses do fail so quickly. And it's oftentimes not that the owners do anything wrong. They might even be doing a lot of the things right. Um, But again, it's like, where is that focus, and how are things set up from day one in order to ensure that you can, in 3 or 5 or 10 years, be continuing to pursue this passion point of yours that makes you feel really driven and alive and aligned. So I think being really honest about how that happens from day one is important. Like, frankly, I couldn't have started this. I did a lot of startups in my 20s and early 30s, and I couldn't have started what I'm doing right now at that point. I was involved in the startups. Other people had more skin in the game than me at the time, and a lot of them failed or, like, exited out at different points, and that's okay. It was a great opportunity to learn. Um, but being honest with myself, I wasn't in a position financially or even maturity wise to be the sole leader of those startups at that time and to make them what they needed to become, even with being willing to work super hard, because that's not all that it takes, right? It's not just about grinding it out. It's waiting for that moment of the aha, knowing that you've got the thing that lights you up, and feels really like, to you, what you said, like spiritual to you, or this like higher than you purpose. So I think waiting for that, and also being honest about what you can take on, so that you don't let that dream and that purpose feel crushed or suffocated. Um,
Yeah,
because the money does matter, right? Like, it's got to be a balance.
yeah, because if it becomes an obligation, it turns into a resentment, and now this
Hmm.
thing is no longer a source of fulfillment, it's a source of resentment, and I think it's so important that we stay connected to the purpose of why we're doing things, because I think that's one of the things I'm really passionate is just helping to raise the consciousness of how people are making decisions about their career, because I think so many times it's, "I gotta make 6 figures so that I can live in the same house as my
Mhm.
sister, and I need to be at a
Right.
certain status socially," and when you finally get those things, which I did, I followed all the rules, I had the 6 figures, I had a house, and I was so empty and dead inside because the
Mhm.
purpose was lacking, and you end up reaching a destination realizing you're on the wrong hill, and so
Mhm.
I'm curious from you, you've been through so many startups, you've been through so much. How did you know when you're like, "Okay, I've found that alignment. I know this is the hill I'm gonna stay on."
I think for me, with Every Woman is Worthy, it's because the brand is bigger than me. It's that it's a brand that has flexibility to mean something different to every person interacting with it. And, like, we can guide that journey and shape narratives a little bit, but, like, it's personal, because everybody's been through a story of, or an experience where they felt devalued. Um, they weren't treated in the way they deserved. Particularly women face that often, in all different spheres, public and private. And for me, it was saying, okay, if this is something that can mean a little something different to everybody, and reinforces the concept of gender equality and women being valuable and needing to be treated a certain way, then I can go to the sky and back with this. It has so much flexibility that I knew that the brand was the power. It wasn't even me. It doesn't even feel like me anymore. Even after just 1 year, it doesn't feel like me. The brand is the power. The brand is something that I can get behind, because I know it can have power for women in Iran who are being told that they have to act a certain way, and otherwise they're subject to violence. I know it has power because it can mean something to women in Australia, where gender crimes are very sky high right now and being talked about a lot. Um, because all of those women deserve to have safety. They're worthy of safety. Women in Iran are worthy of being treated with human rights and freedom. And so this is where that intersection between your inherent worth and knowing that you have value as a human that's unique to you and your experiences and your perspective and what you bring to the table, that's that's where that intersects with the bigger picture of of what needs to change in the world and in the future to honor that for women. So it's a bit like bottom up and top down. And that leaves a lot of room for me to figure things out and evolve it and help it grow and mature as I do, as the team does, as the scale of it does, as we go to different markets and things like that. So that for me was like, okay, this is something that can grow. This has legs. And in the beginning, I mean, honestly, like I think we've done a lot more than I expected to do in just 1 year, frankly. But like, you know, you could look at that and say, oh, this isn't enough. I really want to be at this point, because you're thinking 10 years from now and you're looking at day one, you know, but you've got to give yourself some credit for accomplishments early on. And I heard a really good quote recently that was like, you know, in the beginning, a gardener pours out so much like sweat and energy and time getting a garden started. And at first, even after all that sweat, the garden is going to look small and unimpressive. But if the gardener's consistent and showing up and dedicated to it, like it's going to grow and thrive and produce fruit and all of that. So I loved that little analogy. Makes it simpler and can take the emotions out of it sometimes, because as business owners and entrepreneurs, we get so excited that we want to see the end vision on day one. And the end vision is important to keep in mind. It's important to keep in mind, and it motivates you, but you got to take the accomplishments and be excited along the journey. So
I love that because it's like the journeys never end, the vision's never done, and it's like if you're constantly
mhm.
waiting to arrive, you're missing the joy of the journey and the progress you've made, and I can't believe you've only been doing this for a year, so that's phenomenal. Well, I know we're almost at time, so I would just like to leave you with one question. So anybody like sitting out there, they're burnout, they're just feeling like they've been grinding and they just don't feel fulfilled, they feel stuck, they feel lost. What would you say to them?
That's a tough question. I think there's two ways to come at it. One is that I do believe that no matter what you're doing, even if you feel like it's not the dream job that people talk about on Instagram, or, you know, it's not going to make you famous or something like that. Like, we can all find purpose. We can all find purpose in what we're doing. Uh, Beautiful case in point is so my 2-year-old is still waiting to get into preschool. Thankfully, that's happening very soon. But she was too young to go on the schedule that I wanted her to the preschool. So she has had a babysitter at home, and the babysitter and her husband are from Egypt. And the husband happens to be the custodian at my oldest son's elementary school. And that man is the most joy-filled individual you will ever meet. And he does his job joyfully. He connects with the kids. Everybody knows him. He always has a smile on his face. And that's, you know, that being a custodian is not the type of job that people tend to glorify. A lot of people would think, oh, I've got to do something different, you know, than that. But that doesn't have to be the case. Like, you can find joy in a job that maybe originally you felt stuck in, and like that mindset and reorienting, like, what is your purpose there right now? Because maybe you can't get another job right away for whatever number of reasons, but you can find meaning and purpose in the work that you do. And instead of doing it and feeling like it's a burden, you can dance your way through it, no matter what you're doing. I believe that wholeheartedly. So I think that that's a really important thing for people to keep in mind, especially in America, where we are constantly glorifying going to the next level. We're constantly glorifying people on yachts saying that they only work 2 hours a day. You know, we're constantly glorifying that like fame and freedom thing that really in reality doesn't happen for a lot of people. Like, it happens for a small minority of people. And that's not to say that that can't happen for anybody who desires that, right? Sky's the limit. But I think it's important to balance out the fact that like you can reframe what you're doing and find purpose and meaning in it. And then so that's one answer. And then the other thing is that if you want to start a business, I would say trust that you can do it on less than you think you can. And that instead of waiting until you feel like it's the perfect time or you have everything in order, just going with that minimum viable product, like starting with your beta. Um, and maybe that just means that you want to be an author, and so you start posting blog posts of one chapter or a piece of a chapter or a story that you're telling and making it public at a time, and you pay $13 for a domain name and pop stuff up, and that's all you have to do, right? And that can be a really low cost way to go about things. Um, for Every Woman is Worthy, that's the concept that we are taking, is like we are still very much in beta mode while we're working through the early kinks and trying to keep costs down so that we can continue to give back and donate proceeds to nonprofit organizations that uplift marginalized and oppressed women, since that is the mission of the purchases and the mission of a portion of the proceeds from them. So be joyful where you're at, and also recognize that you don't have to wait for things to be perfect to just make some sort of step forward, to take some sort of action towards your dreams, because um, really the only thing limiting us is usually our mindset. We can do a lot with a little. We don't have to wait for a lot to land in our lap, because it seldom does, and nobody will give it to you, right? We can work towards, in quotes, a lot with resources that we have
I
that are small but that can grow.
thank you so much. I know one thing that I appreciate about you is you're just so connected to the average woman and person out there, so you can just resonate with where they're at and what they can actually, integrate and execute on today. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, Olivia. This has been a lot of fun, and fun to talk about different aspects of the journey. So thanks for your time. Appreciate being here.
Absolutely.